All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Paris Pittman. I work at Google in open source strategy, specifically on Kubernetes. This is Meet Our Contributors. This is our second and last Meet Our Contributors episode of the day today. We convene here on the first Wednesday of every month at two different times, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And one is always a steering committee AMA, and another is always a contributor upstream mentor panel. Today is the same as every other month. We have an awesome panel of folks on the line who are at different stages of their contributor journey, which is perfect for all of your questions. That leads me to the next thing, questions. How do you ask them? In the Meet Our Contributors Slack channel. However, I get most of the questions direct message to me. Some of them add a little bit of personal flair, and folks may not want to be public with that, and that is more than acceptable. So feel free to DM me on Slack or Twitter. And my handle on Twitter is ParrisonBmore. And then lastly, we do have a code of conduct that would include all of our panelists. That would include people who are in the Meet Our Contributor Slack channel. TLDR there is be excellent to each other. So now we'll go into quick intros. First person on my list is George. He's on our ones and twos. He's our VJ today, helping us stream to YouTube. George works at Heptio. Thanks for helping us out, George. And then the next on the list here is Stephen. Why don't you give a quick intro?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I am Stephen Augustus, former CoreOS, now Red Hat, soon to be IBM. I am the Kubernetes product management chair. I also chair SIG release and SIG Azure, and have formerly been on the release team. So, hey.
All right, I had trouble finding my mute button there. Next is Catherine.
Okay, hi, I'm Catherine. I work at Google. I'm involved with SIG testing, working on test infrastructure and such for Kubernetes, and I am pretty new to all of this, so that's fun. Yeah.
And you're going to have a lot of value to add. Thanks, Catherine. Marco.
Hello, everyone. I am Marko Modrinic. I am a student from Serbia, as well as software developer at Lucy. I am working with Kubernetes stuff, currently mostly focused on C cluster lifecycle and cluster API. This year, I was also Google Summer of Code student, and today I am excited to be here on Meet Our Contributors.
Yes, and that is awesome. I can't wait to get into some of the Google Summer of Code stuff. And that leaves our last panelist, Carlisa.
Hi, everybody. I am Carlisa Pinto, and I work for Heptio, soon to be VMware. And I work on the ARC team, which is an open source project that does backup and disaster recovery for Kubernetes clusters. And I am also very new to Kubernetes.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us today, everyone. All right. And the Google Summer of Code was actually a good intro into our first question. And it's just a general question from someone who wants to know how you all got involved with Kubernetes and that there are many open source projects out there. So why contribute to this one? Who wants to go first?
All right, I'll go for it. Hey, so I was formerly a CoreOS field engineer, so I started off working on Tectonic for customers, and kind of got more and more interested as I got deeper into working on the internals of Tectonic about how I could better contribute to the community. So I started off in SIG Azure because I was working on Tectonic for Azure. And then from there, I just kind of got sucked in. You know, we have such a vibrant community. You know, if the question is around why why contribute to Kubernetes over any other open source project? I think that we have one of the best communities, people like Paris and George who kind of make everything really smooth for new contributors. That's me.
And then Marco, talk to us a little bit about Google Summer of Code and how you got involved there and what enticed you to stick around.
The first project I worked on that was related to Kubernetes was Kubicore. And I started on it last summer. And I really liked Kubernetes, how it works, what it does. And at the end, I ended up liking our community and how everyone is good. And I just was impressed. And I decided to see how can I get involved. And I wanted to contribute to upstream Kubernetes. And I found out that there is Google Summer of Code and that it brings students to open source projects. And I like that idea a lot and decided to try for Kubernetes. And I can say that it was definitely the best decision I could make because that 3 months of Summer of Code was awesome and I have learned really a lot. Before I applied for Google Summer of Code, I started contributing, and the first thing I worked on was some test case, and it was like, wow, it is not that hard to work on Kubernetes and such stuff. But this is how I started, and over my Summer of Code internship, I worked on API machinery stuff. Later on, I decided to start working more on cluster lifecycle, but I'm still contributing to both as far as I have time.
I'm very interested to hear how you got up to speed with something as complex as API machinery, but we're going to table that for 1 second. And Carlissa, how did you get involved with the project?
Well, I started working for Hepto, and I started working immediately. I started working with Arc, and Arc works as an extension of Kubernetes. Kubernetes as part of my job, I do need to know it. And for me, a great way to know how project works is by digging through the codes. So I had been looking for opportunities to contribute, and it's a really big project. And I had been telling people, hey, I'm looking for something. Let me know if there is a first-time contributor type of issue. And somebody zipping me, and so I contribute to minor things, and I'm looking. This for me is more of an exploration on ability to know how Kubernetes works for my own sake, but also benefits my work. So.
Very cool. And Catherine, what about you?
So I got involved in Kubernetes starting from the test infrastructure rather than the core project itself. And because Prow, our CI system and such, were interesting projects. The first thing I ended up working on with Kubernetes proper was actually, I was working on our conformance coverage and how to measure that, and that, through a bizarre series of events, devolved into doing some hilarious things to Kubernetes proper. And I've just been kind of keeping going, working on test infrastructure aside from that. It's fun.
Very cool. So, Marco, tell me a little bit about your onboarding process with API machinery. What did you do to get yourself up to speed with everything that is that just machine and all of the just complexity of it? Do you have any tips for others who might be in the same boat, who are looking to get more involved with API machinery and trying to ramp up quickly?
Yes, and when I started with API machinery, it was hard, very hard to get into it. And as I was a student, not really have working experience working on such big projects. It was like hard to understand how everything works, where everything is located to navigate through project. But a very important thing and very important thing to mention is that just ask questions. Go on SIG API machinery channel, go to pick on someone to ask, hey, can you help me with this? Because we have really awesome community and everybody is looking to help and to answer your question. And it is really important to just ask, okay, I'm not sure how to do this, and how do you can help me to show me how API machinery looks like and where I can start. And this is not just for API machinery. For anything you want to pick up, it is important just to, if you don't know, feel free to ask, because everybody here is to help and everybody is looking forward to new contributors and to share knowledge they have.
What has been the most helpful, whether it's doc or communication channel, to kind of help you with your contribution journey so far? And that's a question for all of you. What's been like one thing that you've either found, maybe say in a doc in a repo somewhere where you had a aha moment, or a Slack channel where you said, wow, this is super helpful? Does any of those ring a bell for anybody? Any examples?
For my case, in the community repository somewhere, there is the introduction how to contribute, and these docs are very well written. And for API machinery stuff, there is a document that explains how Kubernetes API works, like how to create an API. And this is maybe an important thing to started working with some stuff, because document is very detailed and can help you to understand why API is made like that. And also one tip that I have is, if you are not sure how something works, well, you can just try debugging that. Like when I started, I was not sure, okay, when this gets executed or how this works, but the tip I got when I started is just run it in debugger and let it see how that gets executed. And that was a fine tip to get started if you're not sure how everything is fitted.
Carlissa, you look like you may have had a response to that as well.
Yeah, I thought Marco was done. So when I did my first contributions, I didn't find this this area of the documentation at first, but when I did find it, there is a set of documentation that walks you through on all different kinds of testing that you can do, like unit tests and a bunch of different tests that you can run, and that is super useful.
I know exactly what you are talking about, and it is very useful. Catherine, it looks like a question for you in the chat. Marky wants to know how you navigate conformance testing. And also, if you could, I guess, just explain what conformance testing is and the role that the SIG is playing in that.
Okay, so conformance testing is a series of tests, and if you pass them, then you are officially Kubernetes conformant, which means that you have a cluster that looks and behaves like a Kubernetes cluster and is interoperable with everyone else's clusters, theoretically, if our tests are good. So I initially started navigating them using some documentation. I'm afraid I can't remember where it is, but there was some handy instructions on how to get started using kubetest to create a cluster and run your tests on them. And those instructions are accurate, and we have been updating them, so I know they are still accurate. So to get started running them, that is an easy way to go about it. In terms of navigating the rest of it, I think talking to other people involved, often in SIG testing and also via Kate's Conformance Slack channels is pretty handy. Yeah.
How can other contributors get involved with that effort?
So the efforts to figure out how to cover them better, I think probably. So what I'm working on is the efforts to figure out what conformance tests we have and what conformance tests we still need. And I would say that probably asking in, again, either SIG testing or Kate's Conformance is probably the best way to get a handle on that. At the moment, it's a little bit abstract.
Yeah.
So I would say additionally there are conversations, I think, every week, every other week in SIG architecture around what conformance looks like. So if you're curious about the structure of conformance for Kubernetes or like what shape that's supposed to take in the future, also hang out in SIG architecture. Those are some like really deep level conversations from the Kubernetes elders. So.
The elders, they were on this morning on the steering committee AMA call. Good question actually came up that session that I'd like to throw out to this one. And it was about influence and how you gain influence into a community. The question was really stemming from an individual who has some kind of idea and is currently going through a technical dispute. And they feel like they don't have enough influence because they're not, I guess, changing whatever they need to change. How does one gain that kind of an influence in a community? I guess, this is probably any kind of open source community. It doesn't even necessarily need to be Kubernetes. But what are some tips that you have for gaining influence? Go ahead, Steven.
So I think the biggest thing that you could do is stuff. Just start doing stuff. There are so many different parts of the project to work on, and so many different places that we actually need help in. So we're always recruiting in SIGs to staff for different sub projects. A lot of the things that I have done to end up being SIG chairs is just finding stuff that people haven't done or haven't had the bandwidth to do and starting doing that. By figuring out what's not actively being worked on and asking questions and showing up to meetings and showing up to community meetings and following issues on GitHub, you start to build not necessarily a following, but people who realize that you're interested and working towards the betterment of the project and will put you in position to continue doing that. So if you are unsure of what you can be doing, it's stuff. So hang out in Slack, hang out on GitHub, attend the SIG calls, ask questions. Please always feel free to ask questions because it doesn't matter who the question's coming from. It really doesn't, right? It's as long as it's all for the betterment of the community, we're about it.
Yeah, I would like to extend a little bit on what Stefan just said. I think for people who are maintainers of open source or not very clear still on the terminology that Kubernetes uses, approvers, I guess, it's very important to. It's very helpful when they know that people want to give continuity. They're willing to invest time and coach and help those who are really showing that they want to keep being involved with the project. And as much as you can get to know people, whether they're Kubernetes people who work in your company, contributors, or if there's a meetup in your city, or if you go to a conference, make sure you go up and talk to people. Just talk to people and get to know people. You might not have like a topic in mind. You might not be talking about anything in specific, but just let people know you and that you're a real person and that you are doing this work, and that is really helpful.
And then what about technical disputes? you example, you are you do not agree with a current proposal, and you think that your way is the better way, and you entered into a technical dispute. How do you resolve? What are some of the steps and tips that you give to folks to resolve that, so that both parties come away without I guess, anger or bad feelings or emotions or things along those lines?
So I think it's really important, and this is kind of like to echo some of the stuff that was said in the steering session earlier. One, I think Sarah says this pretty often, that there are people behind the keyboard, right? So every decision that is made, every line of code that is committed to Kubernetes repos has had some level of technical vetting at some point, and some decision around an API was made, or around the way a test should be implemented was made at some point, right? So be sure that if you have opinions that are contrary to those decisions, that's fine. Try to understand the way the decisions were made in the first place, and come at it from a perspective of, again, you're talking to a human, right? So it's less about the technical decisions, and like conflict is more human than it is technical, right? It's like inherently technology doesn't have conflict, right? If you write it a certain way, right? So talk to the human, try to get a better understanding of where they're coming from, and in doing that, you might get swayed to their side, right? So it's really, I think it's about having open and honest communication throughout the process.
Yeah, I love what Stefan just said, and to also extend on that, I'm not going to say something completely different. Every solution has a technical implementation, and it's going to be one, and it might not be yours. But then you have to understand why not, and that goes to the issue of and trade-offs. And you have to have it helps to have an understanding of the leadership and what they are trying to accomplish and what the goals are, short term and long term. So because if you manage that, you're going to have a good chance of accepting. So the more you understand the humans behind the decisions and why they're making those decisions and those prioritizations, the better you can put together a proposal and anticipate the trade-offs based on that. Like really show that you know what the priorities of the projects are and the trade-offs are related to those priorities. For example, you might have an amazing proposal, but it might contradict a short-term priority that the project has. So that understanding is crucial to know why people are not being receptive to your proposal. They are being receptive to your proposal. So, and it takes time. It takes a lot of time to know what the project's goals are, and how people behind the project think about it and prioritize things, and why placing in different aspects of the project. So.
Marco.
Yes, so actually when I started my summer of code internship, when I shared my project proposal at that, it was like, no, we don't like that or something. There was such responses that as it was my first project, it felt weird, but as mentioned, really important is just to ask and try to get that feedback in a positive way, because someone maybe have more expertise than you or are here for a longer time. So just listen and try to find a good way to resolve that. Maybe you're right, maybe you're not, but it is important to find a way to get what you have on mind, but still to listen. And what is important, if possible, is just to share as early as possible. If you have something on your mind, go ahead on some meeting and let's ask something like, okay, I have idea about that proposal. Do you have any objections? Is there anything you want to see in that proposal, or how do you want to be that done? Because that is important. And that way, you can make sure that your proposal is going to be good when it is ready for sharing. Because even that, maybe there's some feedback that is going to be against that proposal, but maybe you can make it better from the first time.
Yeah, so to that point, and kind of stepping away from just strictly technical decisions, don't be afraid as a new contributor to propose a solution or drive forward on something. I think that a lot of the times you will get support just for not necessarily like making perfect the enemy of good kind of situation, where it's better to have stuff checked into repo that we can iterate over, as opposed to bike shedding over a PR for months, right? So feel free to propose things and to talk with people and socialize ideas on mailing lists and Slack channels, regardless of your stature or your assumed stature in the community.
That slides in with one of the questions that I have here, which is, it seems like an individual sent me a DM and said that it seems like there may be some sort of GitHub etiquette that they're missing. They wanted to know what kind of GitHub etiquette that you know of about this project that maybe other projects either don't have, or some other kind of differences between how we work as a project on GitHub versus how other projects work.
Okay, I'll go for it again.
Yeah.
So with regards to GitHub etiquette, there's a lot of good information. One, as Paris mentioned earlier, we hold ourselves to a code of conduct, and that carries across all of the communication channels that we have. So GitHub, Slack, Discuss, the mailing lists, everything really, right? As well as a set of values that Kubernetes as a community tries to hold true, right? So you can review some of that stuff within the community repo. I would say the community repo is one of the best resources you could possibly have to review things for a project, and that's across a lot of open source projects that I've seen. From the perspective of of what to do to submit PRs or to talk about issues, I would say a lot of the repos that we have in place right now also provide issue templates and PR templates that give you a great idea of how you need to structure your issue, the amount of labels that you need to actually get an issue looked at by someone. There's certain bot commands that you need to be aware of that you can review in test infra. And I mean, overall, there's a modicum of documentation read through that you have to do, and I would say the community repo is the best place to do it. If there is a specific question about how certain things aren't getting pushed through, like I would be curious to hear about it, because I feel that for the most part everyone is pretty responsive, depending on their bandwidth. And again, like, feel free to ask on mailing lists, feel free to ask on Slack, because people are here to help and kind of bolster the community. So.
Carlicia?
The process etiquette. Yeah, so in addition to the process etiquettes, I wanted to also speak about just socializing etiquette in general. And this doesn't go for Kubernetes in specific, just in general. If you are interacting in the mailing list or on Slack, and you'll see a pattern of people responding in a way that you're finding weird, that you're not expecting, pull someone aside. It might not be that person. Pull someone else aside and say, so I said this, and this person replied with this, and that sounded odd to me because get someone's opinion, and maybe they'll say, oh, it's because you're not adding information that it's available, and people are they expect that from you. Ask someone, you might learn something. And maybe, if there's a pattern, but if it's a lot too, it's just people have different communication styles. I have no idea where that question came from, but I'm just wondering if it came from like interaction. Just ask someone to give you an opinion. That's what I do.
I asked them for a follow-up too, to get a little bit more specific on their question. So in the same breath, but from a technical perspective, from a GitHub standpoint, LGTM and approve, Catherine is smiling because we do have regular conversations on nomenclature and what that word means exactly, compared to what role you are within the organization. And for those that are listening and saying, what roles, what does that mean? That is our community membership. So that would be member, reviewer, approver, sub-project owner. But newcomers see this language all the time when they're going through our repos. What is some good ways for folks to really understand what's going on there, especially because it deals with our CI? Catherine, you want to take that one? How can folks get into the know quickly as far as what all of that good info is, like what LGTM is and what approve is?
There is documentation, but I would point out if I knew where it was, but I don't know off the top of my head, and saying URLs is hard. I guess I could just describe the general upshot.
Yeah. Talk about PROW and what PROW is.
Sure. So PROW is a system of things that is responsible for taking your code and testing it and merging it, assuming that it has the LGTMs and approvals, where LGTM can be given by anyone in the project, and approval can be given by approvers on the code you have, who are people who are generally more knowledgeable about what you're approving or they're approving.
And for those that are following, Stephen is actually putting a ton of links in the Slack channel. For those that are following along and are going, what documentation? Documentation's in the Slack channel. Thanks, Stephen. All right. And then, so on that same tip, Stephen, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was going to just say a note about reviewers and approvers. Yeah. So in general, again, it's people behind a keyboard, right? So part of the way that we do definitions of the owner files and owner aliases and things like that is essentially there's a hierarchy, right? So there's a top level owners file, and then within directories there may or may not be additional owners files, right? So something to be aware of is that if you make a change to a top level owners file, that person has higher power over that repo than the people in the subsequent in the lower owner files, right? So something to be aware of is that some of the historical Kubernetes reviewers and approvers are in a lot of those top level owner files, and they're bandwidth short often. So something to be aware of is when you're requesting a code review, make sure that you are following some of the processes and the links that I popped in the channel. And if someone asks you a question for clarity or with regards to the way you implemented a function or something, try to answer it in a very succinct manner, so that when they come back to review it, we're being respectful of everyone's time involved in the process.
And then also for those who are interested in what some of those terms are, the bot on the issues sometimes has links to, like for instance, the label definitions and what have you. Feel free to click on other people's bot links. It does not need to be your issue, but the links should get you to definitions and glossaries and documentation and things along those lines. And Carlicia, you just came off mute. Do you want to add?
Yeah, so I was going to speak to what Stefan just said about people's approving so tight for time. The best PRs that I have ever encountered to review are the ones who add an explanation to the submission in sections where there could be any questions or misunderstanding. Just add to the descriptions, oh, I made this change this way because that saves a lot of time, because the person who is reviewing your PR might say, oh, this change, this is not going to work properly. But if you already anticipated that question, explained it, well, it will, because we are already 1-2 steps ahead. So that's super helpful when people do that. I try to do it too.
All right. And then this is sort of a reverse kind of question, but I like it. If you had one tip to give yourself when you first started onboarding to Kubernetes, what would it be and why? Meaning something you know now that you didn't know then, that you wish you knew then, to save you some time, effort, tears, pain, money. Steven.
So I would, once you become part of the Kubernetes org, I would check out, there's an older email thread about like Tim Hawkins' GitHub filters for his email. If I had known about that a while ago, once you start following certain repos and checking out issues and getting reviews or submitting PRs for things, there is a deluge of email that comes from the Kubernetes org and the associated orgs. So having a good way to manage that, as well as your time as you get deeper and deeper into the project, is really important. I would also say that don't try to learn it all. There's not, like, you can't do it. Kubernetes is like too wide of a surface area at this point to try to learn and understand it all. So if you're interested in contributing, I would say join a bunch of the mailing lists and hang out in the mailing list and see what excites you, and then pick a SIG or two, right? And try to go deep in that SIG and kind of bolster your status within that SIG. And then maybe if you're interested in something else, or there's something that specifically pertains to work, then kind of move around. But definitely start in one place and try to make meaningful contributions there first.
Excellent advice. And Carlicia?
When I had like someone told me to look into this first timers appropriate, I was like, great. And it involved the code change, which meant I needed to build and run tasks, and I had a really tough time making that happen. So what I would tell myself was, I wish I had that chance, because what turned out happening was I took too long, and they really needed, even though it was super. So they got it done, which I'm glad. But I was thinking, wow, I could have done this regardless of if I was working on an issue or not. So get built on a machine if you are planning to contribute later on. So you can get that done out of the way.
The beginning of your tip cut off for me. Was that just me, or was that everybody else? Okay. Can you repeat? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the beginning of your tip one more time? It was just internet connection.
It's my internet connection. I'm having issues.
All good.
So when I had a chance, are you good now?
Yep. Good.
There is a lag. When I had a chance to make a contribution, the first one that people pointed me to was a code change, and I needed to build Kubernetes, and I needed to test it because it was code related. It wasn't just documentation. I wouldn't be worried about building Kubernetes for documentation change. So I had a hard time building it, and I wish I had done before that chance to make a contribution showed up, because they needed that change really fast. And did you guys get this part?
Yep.
So they got done because, and I'm glad they did. But I felt that I could have been prepared. I could have done that regardless whether there was an issue for me to work on or not. So that was I could have been one step ahead there.
That was a good tip. Something that I haven't thought about before. Marco, what about you?
Just don't be scared, because when I started contributing to Kubernetes, like, it was not going well, and I could just not get it working good. Because I was applying for summer of code, it was like, oh, look how bad is it going on. I will never get accepted for this. But it is just important to stay calm down, and if you are starting, it is totally okay that it will not go well, because Kubernetes is a complex project and getting around stuff takes a lot of time. So just stay calm down, ask questions, and don't be worried about anything.
Catherine, what's a tip that you would tell yourself that you know now that you did not know then?
I would probably take a fairly simple tip of ask questions in Slack. People there are very helpful, and also if you talk to people before you make changes, there is a much higher chance that they will be around to review your changes.
That is a good one.
Don't be scared of people. They're nice.
All right. Stephen.
So one more for the don't be scared of people. Honestly, I see occasionally on SIG meetings that new people will be very quiet. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. All of these channels for communication are for all of us, not just for people who have been doing it for a while. And the only way for you to get more ingratiated to the project is to really ask those questions and find ways to do stuff. So please.
Well, that's it for me with questions for today. Do you all have questions for each other? No? You don't want to prod into each other's lives while you have the chance? Steven, was that a hand up or was that
yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know if that was a
So I'd be remiss if I don't try to plug SIG PM on every call. So if you have checked out KEPs and the KEP process and everything that's happening around that, KEPs are essentially the means that we write proposals to improve Kubernetes, right? So it stands for Kubernetes Enhancement Proposals. So if you haven't seen a KEP, or you're interested and curious about some of the changes that are happening in the project, definitely check out the KEPs. So there's both the enhancements repo, which currently contains all the features for the release process, right? So features that we're going to be iterating over for 1.13, 14, 15, what have you. And then there are also KEPs within the community repo, which will be eventually moving from the community repo to the enhancements repo. So I'll link both of those repos. If you're ever curious about like what people are working on next, it's probably in a KEP or it's probably in a feature. So check that out.
Awesome. And then to the 17,000 plus casual contributors that we've had since the start of this project. Does anyone know of any SIGs or sub-projects that are looking for more reviewers or approvers in ways and other areas that our casual contributors can get more involved? Now is your chance to plug those opportunities. Does anybody have anything to plug?
So PM again, release release testing docs, contribx, right? Those are, so so Kubernetes is broken into this idea of kind of like horizontal and then also vertical SIGs, right? So some vertical SIGs examples might be SIGs that work on cloud provider interests. So SIG cloud provider, SIG AWS, SIG Azure, SIG GCP, and then there are horizontal SIGs which touch a little bit of everything within the Kubernetes ecosystem, right? So SIG architecture is concerned with doing API reviews and making sure structure of code and the repos that we maintain are well formed, I guess. Contribex spins up all of these wonderful opportunities to hear from contributors. SIG testing, Catherine was speaking quite in depth about SIG testing. SIG testing handles all the CI/CD, all of the magic wizardry that happens behind the scenes, as well as has a hand in some of the CNCF infrastructure that we maintain. And there were more. Did I say release? I might have said release. So
I guess we now need to promote Stephen into like newcomer ambassador.
One of the craziest ways you can contribute, and like this is only if you have time. Honestly, like it is a significant time. I won't say time suck, but time commitment is joining the release team. Right? If you find a way to shadow on the release team for a cycle and eventually take over as one of the leads for the release team, that is a huge opportunity to get a better understanding of the way all of the different pieces of the project work, because you're kind of enabled to speak to everyone across the project who's working on features, who's submitting tests and tests are failing, or who's doing XYZ, or when are your docs coming in, and it's like asking all of these questions. And I found it personally to be a really great opportunity, because you get to meet people, or you're forced to meet people by way of kind of executing your duties on the release team. Like you have to kind of reach out and understand what people are working on. So that is, if you have the time to contribute to it, I'm happy to talk offline about it as well. But I can drop some links in the channel as well. So
that would be super helpful. And hopefully you all can still hear me. I just had my camera go out. I apologize about that. Any other plugs for casual contributors to help out? Any other SIGs or any other? Marco, I knew you were going to have something.
If you're looking to work on provisioning Kubernetes clusters and setting up Kubernetes and some stuff, Cluster API may be interesting thing to check out. It is a work in progress project. We are actively working on making it better and bringing new features. So if you're interested, check it out. I'm actively working on Cluster API provider for DigitalOcean. We have made it part of Kubernetes 6 organization last week. So it is a new Kubernetes project, and there's some good first new issues. And if you would like to work on setting up Kubernetes on DigitalOcean, that is a good thing to check out. And you can always ping me to talk about it, or if you have questions, or if you want to get introduced it. So there's that.
And then Catherine or Carlicia, do you have any plugs for casual contributors? Totally cool if you don't.
SIG testing could definitely use more people for many, many things. There aren't very many of us, and there are a lot of things to do. As well as for backend and CI, we run the bots, and also do the important functionality of telling jokes and posting dogs and cats.
Yeah, you all do definitely have a high amount of emoji use in your Slack channel. Data has said so. Data is confirmed. And Khaleesi, do you have any plugs?
If you like to contribute to Kubernetes via contributing to a project that extends Kubernetes, talk to me. The code base for Arc is the way it's structured It's very similar. Thank you. I'm good. I know. It's very similar to the way Kubernetes is code base is structured. The way we test is very similar, if not exactly the same. The Kubernetes uses tests, and Arc is growing, is getting a lot of traction out there, and definitely needed, and it's a fun project. So, and I'm there. So.
And that's totally fine to plug. All of our ecosystem projects are amazing and they all need help too. I think people always assume that Kubernetes is the only way to do contributions to the community, and that is not the case, as we all know. So definitely good plug there as well. All right. Now, I'm going to do a really quick plug, which is for contributor experience. Stephen already plugged that. One of the activities that we're working on that we need help with is mentoring. That's why we're all here right now. We need scalable mentoring initiatives. We have several, actually 6 or 7 now that are in some kind of incubation stage, if not implemented stage already. Please come and help us if setting up mentoring programs sounds good for you. We have one that is getting brewed up right now called the one-on-one hour that will link people up to do pair programming and things like that. Super helpful. And this program itself is a scalable mentoring initiative. We have awesome folks on the line right now who are taking their time out to answer questions that you would normally ask a mentor. And that's my plug for contributor experience. And that is our November Meet Our Contributors. Woo woo! I cannot believe that we've already done 11 of these, y'all. We've done 11 of them. I know, George is like, what? Yeah, December will round out our year. And that's it for us. And Stephen, you're off until next year because you've been on twice now, my friend.
No.
Stephen has exhausted his helpfulness, y'all. So he is retired for 2018. Thank you so much for all of your help, everyone. I'm sorry my camera busted at the end. If you need to reach out to any of these folks that are on the line with us, reach out via Slack channel. And if not, and we will see everyone next month. Cool.